You know this song. The feeling. A stadium. A bar with the game on. That one moment football stops being a score and starts being something bigger. It's called Wavin Flag. The man who wrote it is naan, and almost everything you think you know about it is wrong. It was never the official FIFA World Cup song. That was Shakira's Waka Waka. This one was Coca-Cola's campaign anthem, chosen out of hundreds of submissions. Even the drums you're picturing right now weren't in the original recording. The song everyone knows isn't the song he actually wrote. His version was quieter, darker, built from something the world was never allowed to hear. Bruno Mars produced it before anyone knew his name. Jay-Z emailed naan directly after the tournament. You just made an anthem for a generation. None of them knew what it cost him to write it. The World Cup trophy tour for that same tournament visited 86 countries, every nation on the African continent, except his. Too dangerous, they told him. He spent months trying to change their minds. It didn't work. This is the story of naan and Wavin Flag. Millions have sung its chorus. Millions have celebrated to it. But almost no one knows where its words truly came from, or what they cost a 12-year-old boy who carried those memories out of a city consumed by war. The story doesn't begin in a recording studio. It begins generations earlier with the man who shaped him, his grandfather. Before the war, a capital city with a coastline, culture, music, football in every alleyway. And at the center of Somali culture, something specific: poetry. Not casual verse, not poems written in notebooks. The Somali poetic tradition is ancient, technical, and serious. Complex rhyme structures, layers of alliteration, rules about meter and rhythm that take years to master. Improvisation, but within those precise rules. And crucially, it was an oral tradition, held in the body, passed down through memory and speech and performance. This tradition was not decoration, it was function. For centuries, Somali poets used their craft to settle disputes between clans, to negotiate peace, to celebrate victories, to grieve the dead, to challenge power directly, to speak the truth that could not be spoken any other way. The poet in Somali culture was as important as the warrior, sometimes more important. Somalia called itself the nation of poets. That wasn't a new phrase. It was an ancient one, widely known, deeply meant. Naan's grandfather, Haji Muhammad, was one of those poets. Think about what that means in that culture, in that tradition. Not a hobbyist, not someone who wrote verse on weekends. A man whose entire craft was language itself, who understood, through a lifetime of practice, that words could do things fists and weapons could not, who had spent his life building meaning inside language with precision and intention. That man raised naan, not with formal lessons, not with lectures about the importance of words, with presence, with the living example of what language was for. Naan grew up understanding, without being told, that words carried weight, that how you said something determined whether it worked, that meaning had to be earned through craft, not performed, earned. By the age of 11, naan had memorized the entire Quran. That is not a small thing. The Quran contains more than 6,000 verses. Memorizing it completely requires months, sometimes years, of disciplined, sustained practice. It requires exactly the faculty Somali oral poetry requires: the ability to hold language in your body, to speak from memory with precision. This was his training, not in a classroom, in a culture. His grandfather's gift was never a single lesson. It was a way of seeing language, a belief demonstrated daily that words were not decorative. Words were tools, and tools, in the right hands, could do anything. His aunt, known as Magul, which means flower, was one of Somalia's greatest singers. Her comeback concert after years of exile drew the largest crowd in Somali history. She used to sing Naan to sleep as a boy. His father had already gone to New York, working as a taxi driver, sending packages back across the ocean. Hip-hop records. Naan couldn't speak a word of English. He listened anyway. He was transfixed. This was his world before everything changed. His grandfather's poetry, his aunt's voice, a language he couldn't yet understand, arriving in parcels from America. The tools were already forming. He would need every single one of them. By the late 1980s, Mogadishu was sinking. Refugees from the north poured into the city, then soldiers, then clan militias, then the kind of violence that doesn't announce itself with a declaration. It just becomes the new condition of the street. Canaan's neighborhood got a new name among the locals: Rivers of Blood. He fired his first gun at 8 years old. 8. Not on a battlefield, not as a soldier, in a city, on a street. That was the environment. Weapons were not rare, and children were not protected from them. At 11, gunmen in the street. Canaan and 3 friends, running. He escaped. His 3 friends did not. Hold that for a moment. 3 friends dead while he ran at 11 years old. What do you do after that? You go home. You try to sleep. You wake up in the same city. You go outside again because you have to. Because the city is still there and you are still in it. At 12, 3 more friends. Shot by an older boy with a gun. Not a soldier. Not a battle. A teenager. A gun. A street in Mogadishu. 3 more people he knew. Gone. Then, the school. He found something in the dirt. It looked like a rock. He was 12. He picked it up. He threw it. The explosion destroyed half of the school building. He walked away. He has also said he handled a machine gun during this period. Not glimpsed. Held. Used. He has always maintained that he never killed anyone. 6 friends dead before he was a teenager. A gun at 8. A machine gun before 12. A grenade thrown by accident from a schoolyard. During this period, Canaan started writing. Not because anyone told him to, not as therapy or as homework, because his grandfather had spent a lifetime demonstrating that language was the tool you reached for when everything else was out of control. When the world stopped making sense, you went to words. You built meaning in language, because nothing else could hold meaning anymore. Canaan could not stop what was happening around him. He could not bring his friends back. He could not make the streets safe. But he could write about it. And he did. His mother had been watching all of it. Watching the city. Watching her children. She made a decision. Then came January 1991. The civil war reached the city. The government collapsed. Mogadishu became a battlefield. She got her 3 children to the airport. Canaan, his older brother Liban, his younger sister Segal. She put them on one of the last commercial flights to leave the city. He was 13 years old. He left behind an adopted brother, a separation he would carry for 30 years. It would eventually become a film. The plane lifted. Below it, the city of his grandfather's poems was burning. His family went to New York first. He reunited with his father, the man who had sent the records from across the ocean. Then they went to Canada, Toronto, a neighborhood called Rexdale. He did not know English. He did what his grandfather's tradition had taught him. He committed language to memory, word by word. Eric B. and Rakim, phonetically copying words he didn't understand until the meaning followed the sounds. He dropped out of school in 10th grade. He started writing his own verses. Rexdale was not safety. He lost friends there too. Murder, prison, suicide, deportation. He had survived a civil war. He'd arrived somewhere with its own version of the same thing. He started performing at open mic nights. His first real song was called Subox, Come Out in Somali, a direct address to the warlords who had destroyed Mogadishu, rapped in English and Somali both. It became popular in Somalia, a refugee's voice, playing in the city he had fled. He was building something specific, a career built entirely on the truth of what he had survived. Around the year 2000, Geneva, a major UN event marking the 50th anniversary of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, a room full of international diplomats. His manager, Saul Guy, had arranged a performance slot. Naan stood up and criticized the United Nations, in front of the United Nations. A dropout with no album, performing a spoken word piece that directly blamed the UN for its failures in Somalia. Not carefully, not diplomatically, directly. The room gave him a standing ovation. Youssou N'Dour was in that audience, one of Africa's most celebrated musicians. So struck by what he'd seen that he invited Naan to appear on his next album. The direction of Naan's life turned permanently. In the summer of 2007, in an old Sony studio in Manhattan, Naan was recording a song called America. He stopped, went outside. It had rained, wet streets, quiet. A melody arrived. He's described it as one of those songs that overtakes and consumes you. He was in a frenzy. He ran back inside, abandoned America entirely, and started following what had just arrived in his head on a wet New York street. He called it Wavin Flag. The original version is not the song the world knows. The original is a refugee's testimony, specific, unfiltered. Almost no one has heard it. And then, the chorus. Those lines traveled through every stadium, every television, every bar with a match on the screen. 3 billion people heard them. Most of them sang along. They were not written in that New York studio. They were his grandfather's words. Haji Mohammed, the poet from Mogadishu, the man who had spent his entire life demonstrating that language was the most powerful tool available to a human being, who had trained in a tradition older than any living memory, who had seen language used to negotiate peace and challenge power and grieve the dead. He had given his grandson those specific lines, those exact words. In a city that was becoming dangerous, when survival was not guaranteed. Words from a grandfather to a child in a neighborhood called Rivers of Blood. Words that said, "You will make it through this. You will grow older. You will grow stronger. One day, you will be free." That child put his grandfather's words in a chorus. The old poet's words reached further than he could ever have imagined. They are still traveling. Bruno Mars was a producer on the original track, not yet famous. He's recalled renting drums and layering African percussion until the sound was right. Wavin Flag hit #2 in Canada, from a Somali rapper most of the world had never heard of. Then Coca-Cola called. They loved his energy, his story, his connection to Africa. Their global entertainment marketing chief said Naan ticked a whole laundry list. Not a fly-by-night pop star, and the song already felt like celebration. There was just one problem. Lines about poverty and violence don't fit a global beverage campaign. But Coca-Cola didn't strip the lyrics themselves. Naan offered to, before they even asked. I can take this song, refashion some of the lyrics, and give you an exclusive version, he said. His reasoning, stated publicly and consistently repeated since. He saw it as a chance to reach more people. He wasn't working for Coca-Cola. His music was still his. This was a door he chose to open. What changed? The political lines removed. A new celebratory pre-chorus. Around 50 drums added to the production. New lines. Let's rejoice in the beautiful game. See the champions take the field. Critics called it a sellout. The first World Cup ever held on African soil, and the most prominent song of that tournament, had every honest word about African reality quietly removed from it. Naan rejected that framing, every time. His choice, his terms. Reaching more people was never a betrayal in his telling. Both things can be true. It was his choice. And something was lost. The world received the song without knowing there was anything to question. The song topped 10 in over 20 countries. Number 1 in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Mexico, China. 12 bilingual versions: Spanish, Arabic, French, Portuguese, Japanese, Nigerian. A remix with Will.am and David Guetta for international markets. Jay-Z emailed him directly. "Congratulations," he wrote. "You just made an anthem for a generation." 3 billion people watched the 2010 World Cup. Most of them heard Wavin Flag. The World Cup Trophy Tour. 86 countries, 134,000 kilometers. Every nation on the African continent. Every one. Except one. Somalia. Too dangerous. Naan called the FBI about security. He called FIFA directly. He called the Somaliland government. He called the Somali transitional government. Weeks of phone calls. Months of effort. Every angle he could think of. The answer did not change. He was so devastated, he considered not going on the tour at all, not performing in any country. He said later the only reason he continued was realizing he'd only be denying himself. He performed across 86 countries. His country was not one of them. The song was everywhere except his home. In 2012, he published an op-ed in the New York Times. He described the music industry as a tapeworm. He walked away from his newest album, one he said had been built under pressure rather than genuine impulse. He canceled almost all of his tour. Then, quiet. A decade of collaborations, television writing, albums recorded and never released. Then, 2023, a new song called Refugee. February 2024, his first Grammy Award, Best Song for Social Change, for a song called Refugee, written by a man who had been one. He sat in that room with Joni Mitchell and Tracy Chapman, two of his favorite artists alive. He said it felt like his best fantasy made real. None of the old anxiety about what the moment meant for him, just presence. Then, Somalia. He wrote and directed a feature film shot in Somalia itself with Somali actors on Somali land. The country that Coca-Cola and FIFA had said was too dangerous to visit. He went there with a camera and spent months filming. The film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2024. It won a prize. The country that could not host a trophy hosted his production. The next time you hear this song, you'll know that the man who wrote it fired his first gun at 8 years old, that he watched friends die in the streets of Mogadishu before he was 12, that he survived a grenade at school by throwing it rather than holding it, that he left his country at 13 on one of the last commercial flights out. You'll know that he rebuilt himself, word by word, in a foreign language in a neighborhood called Rexdale. From records and open mic nights, from the one tool no war had been able to take from him, his grandfather's gift. The old poet from Mogadishu gave his grandson words to survive the darkest years of a child's life. Words about growing older and growing stronger, about becoming free. The grandson put them in a chorus. 3 billion people sang them, not one of them knowing where the words came from, not one of them knowing about the poet who had spoken them into the ear of a boy who was about to board one of the last flights out of a burning city. That is the inheritance of Wavin Flag. A grandfather's words, carried out of a city on fire, rebuilt in a foreign language, placed inside a song the world thought it already understood, reaching every stadium on earth. The words got everywhere. The boy who carried them still couldn't bring the trophy home. But the words, his grandfather's words, they still travel. They always will. One more thing belongs in this video. Not because it fits the story you just watched, because it doesn't. And leaving it out would be its own kind of editing. In September 2024, Naan was charged with 1 count of sexual assault in Quebec City. The allegation dates back to July 2010, the same summer Wavin Flag was released, during a festival performance in that city. The woman who came forward was in her 20s at the time. She has said she met Naan online that year and that they spent the evening together after his show, his concert, and afterward, his hotel room. She did not go to police until 2022, 12 years later. Naan was charged in 2024. He pleaded not guilty. The trial took place in Quebec City in March of 2026. According to her testimony, the night began well. She said a disagreement changed that, and that Naan became angry. She testified they eventually fell asleep, and that she woke during the night to find him having sex with her, without her consent. She said it took her years and conversations with a therapist before she could name what had happened to her. Naan has denied this from the beginning. Testifying in his own defense, he confirmed much of the evening she described: the show, the hotel room, the disagreement, falling asleep afterward. But on the one thing that matters most, his testimony was direct. He said it never happened. He said he slept through the night and knew nothing until morning. He said there was no ambiguity about consent between them at any point. Testimony in the trial concluded in the spring of 2026. As of this video, no verdict has been reached. Naan is presumed innocent unless a court finds otherwise. We're not going to pretend to know how this ends. That's the truth of it right now. Nothing more. If stories like this, where football history is hiding something bigger, are your thing, that's exactly what Football Insights Today is for. Hit like, subscribe, so the next one finds you, and follow us on Instagram at Football Insights Today for the shorts and the behind the scenes before they land here.